Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar. My name is Joy Rona and I'm a member of the Alumni Lifelong Learning team here at UB. We are grateful you are able to join us today and we hope you and your family are staying well. It is my honor to welcome today's featured presenter, Marsha King. Marsha is the president of Skill Point Consulting, where she works with senior leaders to assess their skills and personality by using various assessment tools, including 360s, behavioral interviews, and personality assessments. She also designs interventions, including training, seminars, team building, and strategic planning initiatives. Most recently, she has conducted leadership development initiatives and coached executives within Amita Healthcare, Kraft, Kellogg School of Management, Hanover Insurance, just to name a select few. Marsha is also a well-renowned professor of leadership and coaching related skills, not only here at UB School of Management, but also at Northwestern, Georgetown, Penn State, and George Washington University. She has also authored several books and articles on leadership skills. While coaching can be defined in many ways, for today's webinar, it will be defined as a skill or process that is used to enhance someone's performance. Whether you are a professional leadership coach who works with multiple clients, or you work for an organization and manage people, coaching skills have become more critical to success than ever before. Marsha is going to discuss the key skills that make a great coach and that enable leaders to bring out the very best in those around them. Just a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. We will leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions at any time during the presentation, please submit them through the GoToWebinar taskbar question section on your screen. And remember, you can chat those to us at any time. In addition, we will be recording today's session and we'll all send you a copy within the next 24 hours. Also, Marsha is kindly sharing today's PowerPoint slides and they're available to download in the handout portion of your GoToWebinar taskbar. There is an additional handout regarding a coaching program and Marsha will detail that in her presentation as well. Be sure to grab both those handouts before today's webinar ends. And now, with no further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our featured presenter, Marsha King.
Great, thank you so much, Joy. That was such a good introduction. I always feel so humbled when I get such a nice introduction, so thank you so much for that. And welcome everybody, I'm so excited to be here. We're gonna be talking about coaching today. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart. I've been doing coaching for about 25 years, either as an internal executive, internal consultant, or as an external. I've been external for the last 10 years and have lots of experiences to share with you. So here I am. I'm a leadership coach, a speaker, a writer, a facilitator, and most recently, I've become a faculty member at UB and am the director of the leadership coaching certification program that I hope you will check out. All right, so a couple of points before we begin. For simplicity, I'm going to be referring to the coach and the coachee. We all know who the coach is. The coach is the person who's providing coaching. The coachee is the recipient of that. It's not my favorite word, but it is the best word that we have, and most of us have adopted that word. So when I refer to the coach and the coachee, you'll know who I'm talking about, the person providing coaching and the recipient of that coaching. This is relevant for a lot of people, leaders of people, as Joy mentioned, people who work in organizations and have to manage and lead people, professional coaches, whether they're internal or external, organizations who want to instill coaching skills into their culture. This is a great program for them to get an understanding of what coaching is and how it can be used. Many organizations have started internal coaching programs, and so this would be great for anybody who is interested in that, and also really just anyone who wants to enhance their leadership skills. It is very difficult to separate coaching from leadership. Coaching is one of the ways that we develop leadership. Leaders should be using coaching skills, so they're used in conjunction often. And so anyone who wants to enhance their leadership skills, coaching is a great way to do that. And also, I just have to mention, I am barely scratching the surface today. So there's so much more to coaching that I'm able to provide in the next hour. So feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with you. All right, So I like to start with stories. Stories are great. They give you the opportunity to take a complex situation and actually simplify it without losing the nuances and the complexities of it. And it also adds color. So it's just a great way. So I'm going to talk about a coaching engagement that I just recently ended. And this was with a gentleman named Alex. Alex is a divisional president of a large consumer packaging firm, really good organization, high growth, high revenue. One of the few organizations that has not suffered that much through COVID, at least not this division. Part of the issue that Alex is experiencing is that he has many analysts on staff that really are the lifeblood of the business. They're the ones who are collecting data, crunching numbers, and helping people make decisions based on data. And they're struggling. So the staff has high attrition. And has been increasing for about the last 5 or 6 years. Alex has been the president for 7 years, and this started happening about 6 years ago. So there's a pretty clear connection between when this all started. It was when Alex took over and became the president. So the CEO is a colleague of mine that I have coached on and off over the years, and he gave me a call and asked me if I would be willing to help. And he said that Alex just needs to be nicer to people. And then he said a statement that was very profound. And he said, word on the street is that he shreds the analysts. Now, when I hear the word shred, that's much stronger than what be nice to people would imply. And so that tells me that this issue most likely goes deeper than simply Alex needs to be nicer. So I met Alex, we started working together. I built rapport with him. We've built a good trusting relationship. And then I had to do some assessment for him. And that really is assessment is meant to create awareness, to create an understanding of how people view him. And so I collected data, I talked to people, I did a personality assessment, I did a 360 on him, collected a lot of data, and came back with a nice picture of who he is. And one of the things that was revealed through this is that he has a serious hot button. And I think many of you will relate to this, and that is about wasting time, which, by the way, is legitimate. I mean, time is a precious commodity to anyone, especially someone as a president of a division of this type and size of organization. So you couldn't blame him for having this hot button. However, the problem was that how it manifested itself. So, and the hot button usually got pushed by the analyst and then inflicted towards the analyst, unfortunately, and hence the high attrition. You can't blame them either. So the behavior that he demonstrated when the hot button was pushed was usually during meetings, public meetings, when the analysts were presenting information, they were presenting data of some nature. And if Alex felt like they were not giving him good information, he felt like it was wasting his time. And that's when he would go from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. And so his approach, he wasn't explosive. He didn't get loud. In fact, he almost got lower. I actually got to sit in one time and watch this happen. And basically what he did was he started asking questions that he knew they couldn't answer. And so they would feel stumped. They would feel, embarrassed. In essence, basically what Alex was doing was shaming strategies for these analysts. And when I pointed that out to him, he was just shocked. He never, ever thought of himself as someone who would shame someone publicly. And so giving him those words is one of the first things I was able to do as a coach that could help make a difference in this situation and help him to see this from other people's perspective. Now, keep in mind, the interesting thing about this is that public shaming is my hot button. And when I see that being inflicted on other people, I really struggle with it. And so my natural personality would lead me to, I do all kinds of bad things, but the biggest thing is I get condescending. And so my natural personality would start to become very condescending towards Alex because I can't stand it when I see somebody bullied. And I felt like that's what was happening. As a coach, one of the most important things that you have to do is understand yourself, have great self-awareness, because the minute I allow that hot button to manifest itself in my relationship with Alex, the relationship is over. And so understanding yourself and being able to compartmentalize that piece of you, putting that aside, so that you can be what your client needs or what your coachee needs, instead of allowing yourself the pleasure of allowing that to manifest itself and doing what you want to do because it feels satisfying. And so I had to pull that back. I had to compartmentalize it, and then I could be a more effective coach with Alex. So let's move forward. All right, so first things first. So after we collected data, we uncovered this, we created this great picture of him, not so great picture of him in some pieces. But let me stop and pause and say, Alex is not a bad person. Alex is actually a very good person and cares deeply about people, which is why he was so shocked when I revealed to him that he was doing these shaming strategies with people. Most people are very good. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go to work today and bully people, but we still do it. Alex didn't realize he was doing it, and understanding that and having that self-awareness was the first step towards stopping it. So first things first, though, after we collected the data, we identified the derailing behavior. Really what I wanted to do with him is identify, who does he want to be? What kind of a leader does he want to be? Who does he aspire to be? Does he want to motivate people, or does he want to manage through motivation and inspiration, or does he want to use fear and intimidation? Well, no one's going to say they want to use fear and intimidation, right? He wanted to be the type of leader that was a multiplier of talent, so that people wanted to work with him and for him, that people were able to achieve their very best working for him. And so we worked together on identifying all the attributes, and he ended up coming up with 7 attributes of leadership that he wanted to demonstrate. Now, I use a very strengths-based approach as a coach. I feel strongly about that. And I knew that one of his strengths was asking very insightful questions. He had proven this again and again, unfortunately in a negative way. And so reframing inquiry for him was pretty powerful. And so instead of asking these demoralizing questions, we started identifying questions that could inspire people and also get into more information and create more insight in the situation, in the data that they were presenting. So instead of asking these terrible questions, we started working on what are some questions that you could ask that is going to get you what you need and elevate the people at the same time. And so one of the things that we did is we actually worked on writing lists of questions and even practiced them together. That sounds very tactical, but I would tell you it's actually very strategic to give somebody the opportunity to completely change their style, use their strength in a completely different way to change their style. Very strategic as a coach. So attrition is lower, and more importantly, he's becoming the leader that he's meant to be. So that is an example of coaching. Now, this sounds very much like an example that only applies to an external coach. It really doesn't. Every single thing here that I've mentioned also plays true internally. As a leader, as a manager, these are all the skills that you need to be able to do. One of the things I assessed during the assessment period is I really tried to figure out why he was doing some of these things. So I looked at the personality assessment, and I also looked backwards into his life. And he came from a military family, which presents many, many, many benefits. For him, one of the not so great attributes that created in him was this awareness of time. He even told time in military terms. And so looking backwards was really important. This is the place where a lot of leaders, managers, and even professional coaches feel very uncomfortable. They feel like going backwards and looking at childhood or experiences or whatever it is in someone's past or former life is therapy. So let me dispel that for you. It's not therapy. I mean, you have friends and you know their background. You're not afraid to ask questions about their background. You're not providing therapy. It's simply getting to know the person and trying to figure out what makes them tick. Totally fine. Now, when I went backwards and looked into his childhood and his upbringing and his parents and their style, I'm not trying to go back and fix any of that. That would be therapy, and I'm not qualified to do it. But a coach, whether they're internal or external, is absolutely qualified to help someone look back and make connections between stuff that happened to them earlier in life, events or experiences they've had, that they are now creating a connection to the present. And that connection seems so rational to them at the time until they figure out where it comes from. So pointing out to him the lifestyle that he led in his childhood and early adolescence really was being manifested and showing up in the present time. That is irrational. And so pointing that out to him is just very helpful. All right, so that's the example, and I want to refer back to that as we go through this. So who's a coach? Simply someone who walks beside another person to help them not only grow in the current situation, this is important, not just the current situation, but also to become self-sustaining in their growth so that their potential expands exponentially, and they're doing it on their own. Every coach should be trying to work themselves out of a job. I know coaches that will work with people for years, and at some point you have to ask yourself if they're really a coach or are they just a friend. Sometimes they're a coach. I don't want to place a judgment on that. Sometimes it actually is impactful. I know for myself, I am somebody who my coaching lasts between 6 to 12 months. After that, I'm not going to make a difference after that. If I can't make a difference in the first 6 to 12 months, I'm probably not going to make a difference. All right, so the goal of coaching, to provide a safe space with a coachee to engage in a way that enhances growth and learning so that they can own their problems and solutions and manage an increase in the complexity and difficulty of their future work. That's a mouthful, right? I want you to take a moment and look at this definition and identify what you think are the most important words here. I'm going to go through what I think they are, and I think it'll be interesting. All right. I have a feeling I know what some of the words are that you've identified. All right, critical element number one for me is safe space. Safe space. Now, when we say safe space, I'm talking about psychological safety, not like physical safety. I mean psychological safety. Someone working as a coach, again, either as a manager or as external coach, have to provide a psychologically safe space at all times. They have to provide confidentiality. The person being coached has to believe that whatever they say and do is not going anywhere. If confidentiality is breached, the coaching engagement is not going to be effective. The coach should not have an agenda. So, and there's nothing wrong with having an agenda, but if you do, that's not coaching. That's probably mentoring or managing. And has to be looking out for the coachee. And this actually is more relevant to an external coach. As an external coach, you're hired by the company. So the company really is your client, but you're coaching the person. And so that is a dynamic that has to be managed. It has to be admitted and it has to be managed. I make it very clear that the relationship between myself and the person I'm coaching is the most important relationship, and that I will not breach confidentiality. I will not go into it with an agenda. I will not go into it assuming I have to fix somebody. I assume that the person's whole and complete, but we all could become better. And so that's just a dynamic that the external coach has to constantly monitor. And then also, if the coach is able to provide those first 4 bullet points, it's going to lead to vulnerability, which leads to trust. So really critical to have a very trusting relationship between coach and coachee. And think about that as a manager or a leader, how important it is to be able to have trust. Critical, every bit as critical as if you are an external coach. All right, so lack of this safe space will lead to defensiveness. The coachee was going to be closed off, unwilling to take risks. Very difficult to grow if you're unwilling to take risks. Has anybody worked in an environment that was not psychologically safe? How many risks did you take? My guess would be very little, very few. All right, critical element number 2. So this is the words "so that." I think that might be a surprise to everybody. And the reason "so that" is critical here is because everything before the sentence, or the keywords "so that" is, well, let me move into this, is the what. Everything afterwards is the why. It's the so what. I'm sorry, I keep saying so what, I mean so that. All right, so anything after the words "so that" implies the purpose or the outcome of the coaching. The point here, and I'm not saying it very well, but the point here is that coaching can't be coaching just for the sake of coaching. There has to be a goal. There has to be some outcome that you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, how do you know you're being successful? There's got to be a roadmap, and there's got to be an end goal that you're striving for. So again, goals, outcomes, and it should be able to be measured largely. The next piece I'm going to talk about is very difficult to measure. And that is that in coaching, what research has shown us in the last 15 years or 20 years is that emotional intelligence is what we really want to coach to. Coaching towards business outcomes, business problems, trying to solve problems is more consulting. And again, it's good. But if you want the person to grow and develop, helping them solve their problems really fixes the current. And it does some development for the future. But focusing on the emotional intelligence, that's really what makes a difference. In fact, more and more organizations have figured this out. In 2006, 37% of coaching engagements revolved around solving problems. 43% was on emotional intelligence. Today, it's 16 and 61. So organizations have figured it out that that is the type of stuff that has the greater long-term impact, is helping people with emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, just for simplicity of definition, is really about self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. So it's the people stuff. We all say that those are the soft skills. I say they're the hard skills. And those are the skills that make a difference. We all know that really smart person who can't work with people, right? That's what this is talking about. So helping that really smart person become better working with people, that's where the impact is. All right, so ownership, that's the third. Own is the third critical element to this. And I think this is the most important, by the way. So it's about ownership of problems and solutions. Let's talk about ownership of problems. So unless somebody is able to own their problems, they never really get the chance to experience the problem or live with it or feel what it feels like, understand it inside and out, to be able to explain the complexities of it, to take responsibility for it. Owning problems leads to accountability. Have you ever had a direct report who just wouldn't take accountability for their work? Yeah, that's the problem. We experience that way too often. So ownership of problems is really, really critical. One of the examples I often give is somebody who is just a superstar, but had success after success after success and got promoted because of that. And then they get into the new role and they fail. One of the reasons is that they were promoted based on their success, not necessarily on their growth and learning. Many people who've had nothing but success have never had the opportunity to live with their problems and live with their mistakes. People who get promoted too early, it really does a lot of damage to their career. And so allowing people enough time to have work problems, to solve through them, to have failures, to spring back from those failures, really important to someone's growth and development. The ownership of solutions allows people to learn how to identify and develop solutions, gain input and buy-in. That's really important. And then execute on the solutions. This leads to engagement and influence. If someone is able to own their solutions in a way where they're able to be successful, that allows them to feel more confident the next time and therefore are much more influential. Some other benefits from ownership is really about developing resilience, which, as we all know, in the last several months has been a hot topic, is how do you create a workforce that's resilient? Think about this. If we go through another pandemic next year, we're well equipped for it now. That's resilience. We've learned and grown from this. Just our ability to use technology and work from home. I mean, that's a huge piece of it. We've become a much, much more resilient workforce. So ownership of problems and solutions contributes to that. So having said that, anybody care to guess what the biggest derailer of ownership is? Think to yourself, what do you think the biggest derailer of ownership is? Why is it that people don't take ownership, either of problems or solutions, but especially problems? There's good intentions behind it. It's usually because the manager takes on the problem because, again, good intentions. They don't want to overwhelm the employee, or they're afraid that the employee is doing too much. They're afraid the employee can't handle it. The skills will never get stretched, and that person will never be able to step into a place where they can handle these problems and solutions in the future. The manager has very good intentions in mind, but the manager is also going to have to own those problems forever. All right, element number 4. All right, so this is part of the so that. The whole so that is that when you are using a coaching style as a manager or you're an external coach, you really want to help somebody to be able to not just solve what's going on and manage what's going on, but also be able to handle and manage an increase in complexity and difficulty of future work. That is the whole goal, is that they're stretched and that they're able to handle future work. This leads to expansion of capability, capacity, and skills. It also leads to the ability to have higher level roles. I mean, if you want to get promoted, make sure that you're able to increase the complexity and difficulty of the world around you. So higher level roles, a greater span of control, new and different opportunities, and just in general, stronger results. This, by the way, is what makes development sustainable. Again, every coach, every manager, every leader should be trying to work themselves out of a job. That should be one of the goals. And if you're able to develop a workforce or a coachee to be someone who can manage greater complexity and greater difficulty, they're going to be able to take on their own problems. They're going to be able to take these things on by themselves. They'll no longer need the help of the manager or no longer need the help of the coach. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what are some critical skills for coaching. Listening and asking powerful questions, assessment and feedback. I could go on and on and on. I could probably list 100 critical skills for coaching, but I'm picking these 4 because I think they're the most relevant. I will tell you that there are others like reframing, I think are really important. There's others like teaching someone to be optimistic. I think that's another really important one, but I'm going to limit myself to 4 today. All right, let's go to the first one, listening. There's 4 levels of listening. The first one's the easy one. It's listening with yourself in mind. This is how we build rapport and connection with people. We also listen to understand at number 2. That's basically using paraphrasing so that people can see that you get what they're saying. You get it. This shows that you get it. Number 3 is a little harder, and that's listening for emotion. And that's not just the words, but what's behind the words. And that shows that you not only get it, you get them. There are times when I've been working with an executive and I demonstrate this type of listening, and it may be the first time in that person's life where they've actually felt truly understood. It's kind of sad, but true. We don't do this one very well. We're afraid to go to that emotional place. Again, many of us are afraid that it's when you address somebody's emotions, what we're afraid of is that they will multiply. They will get, it's like opening a can of worms. The reality of the matter is it's the exact opposite. When we address someone's emotions and acknowledge them and validate them, they diminish. And so if people are being overly emotional around you, most likely that's what they need. They need someone to acknowledge and validate the emotions that they're feeling. The last level is much harder. We rarely use this, but that's listening for the invisible. So it's like have you ever walked into a room and felt tension, or walked into a situation where you felt like you were in danger, you felt fear? Yeah, most of us can say yes to those questions, and that's listening for the invisible. It is powerful. We should learn more about tapping into it, but it's difficult. All right, so the third one is asking powerful questions. And, I have these listed from least powerful to most powerful. This is from an article called The Art of Powerful Questions. And basically, it's, the yes, no questions are not that powerful, all the way up to why. And some of the things that you gain when you go up in power and ask more reflective questions is it encourages reflection, discovery, creates creativity, expands learning, and opens up the possibilities. Those are the types of questions we want to ask. And generally, why questions are really good about that until they're not. So why questions are powerful, they're also the most dangerous. So we have to be very careful with them. When why questions become dangerous is when we are asking why about the person instead of the task at hand or the event, the situation. Asking a question, why did you do that? For example, if we're not careful, it comes across as judgmental. So that's what we want to watch out for. Just direct questions, why questions, away from the person and to the situation or the task at hand. All right, assessment. So coaches generally use 2 forms of assessment, whether you're managing, leading, or an external coach. And that's behavioral and personality. So behavioral is what they're doing. It's the behaviors they're demonstrating. You get that from observation, from 360s, from stakeholder interviews. That gives you a good picture of the what. Personality, on the other hand, helps you to understand the why. Why are they doing it? So it's it's a very good picture to create as a coach is what is the person doing and why are they doing it? If you want to create change, understand what someone's doing. If you want to help them sustain change, help them understand why they're doing it. All right. So the last piece on this is feedback. And, you know, basically what I did is I put a very simple, simplistic development plan. Once the assessment is collected and you've created that picture, that painting of what they're doing and why they're doing it, it's really helpful then to provide them feedback and at the same time create the development plan. And so as you're providing the feedback, you're getting their reaction, you're getting their involvement, and it's very natural at the same time to say, okay, well, here's the feedback. What do we want to do together about this? And it should be a balance between strengths and areas of development. You know, you absolutely want to emphasize areas of strength, and then you also want to diminish the areas of development. So the conversation should be balanced between the two. You'll see on this screen that it's you know, the 2 to 3 areas of strength and 2 to 3 areas of development. And then we come up with some goals, some short-term, some long-term actions, resources needed. Those are very common and typical. The 2 pieces at the bottom I think are important. One of them is the transition planning. And so transition planning is the over evidence that the coach is actually trying to work themselves out of the job. The goal should be that the learning, the growth, the transformation that the coachee is experiencing should no longer rest with the coach. It should rest with the coachee. And so the coach should be able to exit the relationship. And that's as an external coach. As a manager, what that means is you're able to enter and exit the coaching style of management as you need it. You shouldn't always have to be a coach as a manager. There are other times when you need to use other styles. But the transition planning is what allows you to plan for that. If you're going to just let it happen naturally, it's not going to go well. And so be intentional about how you plan to transition the engagement from the coach fully onto the coachee. And it's going to be things like, what are the aspects of our engagement that you have gained from, and what do you want to continue gaining from, and how are you going to do that? What resources do you need? Who should you get involved? How are you going to hold yourself accountable? All of these questions should be asked. The second piece at the bottom of this that I really like is about the emotional intelligence piece. And again, this is becoming increasingly important to develop people in and to use as one of our main tools in coaching. And what research is showing is that people will sustain change to a greater degree and for a lot longer if we're focusing on those aspects, the self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Again, all of us could increase in these skills and there would be no harm at all. Everyone should improve emotional intelligence. I think that would be very healthy for everybody. And so part of the engagement should be about that. And so this is really just documenting it. How are you working on that? How is it going? What are your plans regarding this? Okay. All right, so I want to go back to Alex for a moment. So having said all of this about what coaching is, the goal of coaching, the key skills, critical elements of coaching, I want to talk a little bit about what I did with Alex. I listened intently. I listened to everybody around me. I listened to Alex. I listened to the CEO, his manager. I listened to the analyst. I listened to the other people, non-analysts around Alex. And that's how I was able to develop the picture of his hot button was pushed by the analysts, not the other people. I asked a lot of powerful questions. You know, probably one of the most powerful questions I asked Alex is, who do you want to be? So this is the picture of you. Who do you want to be? And so we worked a great deal on identifying. Again, he came up with the 7 attributes of leadership that he wanted to be known for. And what we did is we actually went through and we created behaviors for him to back into so that he could demonstrate those daily. I conducted the in-depth assessment. And again, it was a history interview with him to go deep back into his life and look at those experiences, which really helped to explain a lot. I did a 360, I did a bunch of stakeholder interviews, and then I did the personality assessment, which was really important to do. because again, it helped him to see why he was doing what he was doing. I gave him feedback, very direct and firm, but gentle feedback, because I already knew he had a hard time believing that he was coming across as though he didn't care for this group of people, which he cared deeply for. One of the things that he said regularly was, how could people think that I don't have their best interest in mind? All I do is work to make sure that they have jobs so that they can take care of themselves and their families. So guess where he heard that from? You know, that's how that was demonstrated to him most of his life. And so that was his expression. Basically, that was his expression of affection towards people, was that he just worked so hard to make sure that they were able to keep their jobs to take care of themselves and their families. And it's, you know, again, not a bad thing at all, but it was being misunderstood in many ways. And so his hot button would get pushed, and all of the good work that he did for people would just go out the window. People don't really remember what you do. They remember how you make them feel. And then when he would do public shaming, he didn't make people feel good. And that's what they remembered. So this is what we did. I gave him feedback. We created a development plan. Part of the development plan was creating a picture for leadership that he wanted to demonstrate. And I gave him all these things that he needed: a safe space, so that he could take accountability, so that he could own his issues and the solutions, so that he could increase his leadership capability. And that's exactly what happened. Attrition became lower. People were starting to ask him to be their mentor. Very positive signs. And now I'm not going to say he's completely transformed. He's going to slip back, and he has slipped back. But he catches himself now, which is why it's self-sustaining. He no longer needs me there. He'll call me occasionally just to get advice or to chat through something. But for the most part, he's doing just monumentally better and developing stronger relationships, controlling himself better. Many, many positives for him. Okay, so let me stop and pause for a moment. I know that there was at least one question before I jump into, there's a second piece of this presentation, and I believe there was a question about, Joy, do you have it by chance? It was about 360s. How do you make sure that 360, do you have it?
I do. So the question that was asked about the 360 was, how do you assure that the 360 reviews are accurate and not just a selection from friends, or at the other extreme, coworkers with personal grudges?
Yeah. So that's such a good question, whoever asked it. And I always tell people that you want to mix. You want a mix of friends and foes. You don't want all friends, you don't want all foes, but you do want to get feedback from both. And so usually what happens is I ask my coachee to come up with a list of names and identify the relationship, give me a heads up on what I should expect. That actually is a really good form of assessment also. If the coachee knows what to expect and is accurate in what people are going to say about him or her, that means they've got some self-awareness. So it's another way to do some assessment. Once the list is generated, I usually have somebody internally that I ask them to show it to hold them accountable. And it's usually the manager. It might be the manager, maybe the HR contact, but it's show the list of people so that you're not picking all one, all the other. Some people will, believe it or not, pick all foes. And so you have to be careful with that too. So there needs to be a third person or even a fourth person who's able to look at the list of names to validate it, to make sure that it's a balanced view. Great, is a great question. Okay, so as you have more questions, please put them into the chat box. I'll be happy to answer them. I'm going to go a little bit into the leadership coaching program at UB. This is through the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. This is the first year, and this again is for leaders of people, managers or people leading people in organizations, professional coaches like myself, organizations who want to instill coaching skills into their culture. It starts in October. It's October 13th is the first day. It goes through May of 2021, I think end of May. There's 4 courses in this program, 1 optional certification that I'm absolutely going to recommend. Course number 1 is about foundations of coaching. That's mostly the stuff I've been talking about today. I've barely scratched the surface on course number 1. Course number 2 is a deep dive into assessment and feedback. And this is something that we differentiated ourselves from other coaching certification programs, is we've got an entire course on assessment and feedback. We then go into an advanced coaching course. So Foundations of Coaching is going to make you a good coach. You're going to have all the skills, you're going to be proficient, you're going to go out and become a better manager, a better leader, a better professional coach. Advanced is what makes you a great coach. And this really gets into the psychology and the neuroscience behind coaching and leadership. Very, very important. Another differentiator of this program. The very last thing is the practicum. So everyone will have to go out and get a couple of clients, and they will be coaching these probably 2, maybe 3 people for 8 weeks under the supervision of a UB faculty member. Then there's an optional Hogan certification that's in December. So Hogan has been very generous with us. I've been using Hogan for 25 years. It is the best tool in my mind out there because it's the only tool that really reflects the complexity of personality. Personality is just incredibly difficult to understand and very complex. This is the tool that gets to it better than the other tools in my mind. This is my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with me. But the beauty about this also is that Hogan is offering this at just a ridiculously low price. So, so people who are going through this program, I really encourage them to sign up for this as well. The optional Hogan certification is about half the price as I paid 25 years ago when I went through it the first time, and it's remote, so you can do it virtually. All of these, by the way, are virtual. We do have an on-site at the beginning of Foundations, Advanced, and Practicum. But that is personal choice. If you want to come in person, you can, you don't have to. And who knows with what's going on, that may end up being virtual for everybody. We don't know yet, but I want you to know that there is an on-site and it's optional to come in person or not. It's totally personal choice. Okay, we are the facilitators, myself and my esteemed colleague, Neil Stroll. I started the coaching program at Northwestern, one of the founding faculty member. Neil was the founding faculty member at Georgetown. I taught for 10 programs at Northwestern. I'm sorry, I taught for 10 years in the program at Northwestern, and Neil taught for 20 at Georgetown. We are very, very fortunate to have him with us. You're going to walk away with a ton of practice. Again, whether you're internal or external, all of these will be very relevant to you. You're going to have provide coaching every single week. You're going to receive coaching every single week. You're going to learn from the group dynamics. You're going to have faculty observed coaching practice, real world with the practicum. You're going to see modeling. I'm going to bring in experts across the industry to do modeling for students. You'll end up with all kinds of things, tools, strategies, techniques, a great network, and of course, hopefully the coaching, the Hogan certification. This is just, just a one pager of the courses, a brief description, and dates. This is the same data, I just put it graphically. This does show where the optional Hogan certification falls. So it's after the first course, right before the second. If you want more information, you can, there's an email address, there's a website. Take a moment, you can take a snapshot of this if you want to. And that is really, let me see, are there any other questions? Yeah, I think there's a couple questions. So let's answer those questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So let me answer those questions and see if there's any extra time. Joy, you want to go ahead and ask the questions?
I am happy to. So the first question we had submitted was, can you contrast or explain the difference between coaching versus mentoring?
That's so funny. So that was the next piece if I had time to go into it. Ta-da! So I was going to differentiate therapy from consulting, mentoring, and coaching. Therapy really is about looking in the past and trying to heal. Now, this is generalizing. That doesn't mean therapists don't come forward. They do. But what's different about them is they focus on the past, and their real focus is on healing. And also, the therapist is the expert here. Consulting is focused on the present, trying to solve problems, create solutions, where the consultant is the expert, consultant is the hero. Mentoring is focused on the present and maybe the future, but it's about providing advice and guidance. The mentor is the hero here, the mentor is the expert. The difference between these two is that coaching really is focused on the future and meant to develop someone to become bigger, better for the future. The focus is on their growth, not on solving current problems. You may use current problems in which to create that growth, but really the goal of coaching is to help someone grow and develop and become better for the future. In this situation, the coachee is supposed to be the expert. The coach is not the expert or the hero. Every coach should be asking themselves, who's the hero here? Is it me or is it them? Every coach should be trying to make the coachee the expert, the person who's able to solve the problems, the person who owns everything. The minute the coach starts owning, or the minute the coach starts giving advice or telling them what to do and directing, they've left coaching. That's no longer coaching. Now, that is a very purist view, and I'm sharing that because I'm trying to create distinctions. Of course, there's overlap, and of course, there's shades of gray, but that in general, I would say that that is it.
Thank you so much. I was wondering that myself while the presentation went on, so I'm glad somebody else asked it.
Me too. It's a great question.
The next question is, so when you do a 360, do you include yourself, Marsha, or as a test administrator, do you include yourself in those?
No, no. It really should be, I would be too biased in this. Now, it would be impossible, as much as you try to compartmentalize, it would be impossible as you give feedback and as you are looking for trends and themes in the data, it'd be impossible to pull your own experiences out of that. I'm naturally going to look at trends and themes that I may have seen as well. Now, as a coach, you want to be as unbiased as you possibly can and try to really put yourself aside so that you can make sure you're getting a realistic picture that you are not making biased or creating because you're biased. So, so no, you should not be part of that.
Okay, that clarifies it a lot. So our next question is, what strategy do you use when your coachee is not ready to own the issue and or situation? How much as a coach do you push?
Okay, so that is one of the things that we teach in our programs really strongly, and that is about you have to identify that for yourself. Every coach is going to have a different answer for that. So, you know, I can speak for myself. As a coach, I'm pretty direct. And if I see a trend in my coachee of not accepting accountability, I point it out. And I let, you know, I give them, of course, I don't make, it's not an accusation. It's just I'm pointing out a trend I'm seeing. And I want to have a discussion about that. And it's a wonderful way to create self-awareness for the coachee. So how hard do you push? I think it depends on who you are as a coach. It depends on how much feedback can the person hear. I actually think people can hear more feedback than most of us realize. I think being direct works more than it doesn't. And I think it's refreshing. You know, sometimes people ask me, what do I do for a living? And you know, when I think about it is I go into organizations and I tell them the truth. Sometimes people have not been told the truth. You can't expect people to perform if no one's ever told them the truth. And so my answer to that is I would push pretty hard. And I probably would bring it up more than once if they're still not accepting accountability. I mean, it's really hard to be successful if you don't accept accountability. I don't care who you are, you can accept accountability for some part in whatever issue is going on. You don't have to accept accountability for the entire thing, but if I have a coachee who's refusing to take accountability, at some point I'll stop and I'll say, what can you take accountability for? And see what they say. And that sounds harsh, doesn't it? It probably feels harsh too. But there are times when that needs to be said. So we have to decide what kind of a coach, what kind of a leader are we going to be? I'm going to be one that tells the truth. I'm going to try to really help people to have enough self-awareness to know that they got to take some accountability, even if it's not for the whole thing. It's for they can take accountability for something. So I'm answering it more for myself than I am for coaches overall. That's the difficulty here. That's a personal choice on a coach's part.
Coaches really do sound like they've got some hard work, they're kind of swimming up against stream, aren't they, Marsha? Like a lot of people aren't as direct as you said.
Right,
and so
right.
It's almost like you're coming in to do exactly what is not the norm. And
Yeah, it is. It's to point out those things and to help create solutions, help the person create solutions and own it. I will say coaching has gotten a lot better and a lot easier. When I started out 25 years ago, I wouldn't even dare touch that topic because there was an expectation that you were careful. But as we've grown in the industry, it really has improved and evolved, and it's now accepted to to really go to the core of the issues. So it has gotten easier in my mind. Yeah.
Well, easier is sounds better. We got some more questions here. So do you ever coach more than one person at a time?
Absolutely. I mean, I coach up to 20 people. That's kind of my cap. I get burned out. I'm like only at like a 7 or 8 right now, but I'm also teaching quite a bit. But the question might actually be more than one person on the same team or more than one person in the same organization. And the answer to that is also yes. But there are some coaches that won't. So I just started coaching a woman who is the head of HR in a company on the East Coast. And one of the requirements to coach her was that she wanted to make sure I was not coaching anyone else. And I'm fine with that. That's totally fine. So that's a personal preference. It's an agreement, but can you? Absolutely.
All right. Just a reminder, there are some handouts today in your GoToWebinar taskbar, including information about the coaching program that Marsha outlined earlier. So be sure to grab those handouts before the webinar ends. And I think we've got one more question, Marsha. Let me get to it. Have you had experience when someone wants to be a coach, but has little or no qualification to be the coach?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why people go through training programs such as the one at UB. It's all of us start out with no experience. When I started out coaching, of course, my first exposure to coaching was as a grad student. I was hired to coach engineering faculty. The reality of the matter is I was hired to train engineering faculty. It wasn't real coaching, but I learned how to start assessing people against a standard criteria, which was a huge part of that eventually led me to it. But yeah, I mean, people make career changes all the time by going through a program like the one we have at UB. There's just a ton of people who just have a natural ability to do it. They're drawn to it. They like it. People seek them out for coaching. Oftentimes they're seeking them out for guidance and suggestions and advice. That's usually how it starts out. But then as somebody becomes more trained and more educated on what coaching is, they change their style of giving advice. And, again, that's what a little education, reading a few books, watching some seminars, going through a program, having I'll tell you, a great way to learn coaching is to get a coach. Every coach should have at least one coach. I have 3. I've got one that I pay and 2 that we just kind of do pro bono work for each other. It's really important because it lets you to see other people's styles. It lets them model behaviors for you. But that's a great way to kind of get a taste of what coaching is like so that you can see if it's something that you would enjoy doing. But yeah, the answer is yes, 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 and yes.
Excellent. And we have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a stigma about not getting coaching? Like, I should already know this, or this is what I'm paid to do?
Yeah. This is so fascinating. One of the reasons coaching struggled on the front end when it started becoming a real industry is because a lot of organizations hired coaches to come in and fix problems and fix someone, which I think is horrendous. We should never think of fixing anyone. But they only hired coaches when there was a problem. And so naturally, you see me walking down the hall and everyone's going to run because they're like, oh my God, if she's coming to find me, that means I'm in trouble. I'm doing something wrong. And so early on, there was a stigma. It has totally changed. It is completely reversed. Coaching is now used in so many powerful ways, and it's reserved for really talented, high potential, and often senior people. And so the stigma, I'm sure there are some stigma still out there, but it's mostly gone at this point. Most people realize that coaching is a privilege, that it's an investment because it's not cheap, that an organization must think highly of somebody. Even if somebody has a derailing factor like Alex. Alex is a crazy high performer. His ability to manage this business is just, unbeatable, but he had that one derailing factor. And so even he saw this as a privilege and an honor and an investment in him, because the CEO felt like he was worthy of this investment. He is, he still is, he's great. But after going through coaching, he's even better. And that's how people are viewing it. That's a good question, though.
Thank you so much, Marsha. This has been a great Q&A session. And on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, I would like to thank you for sharing your time, knowledge, and expertise. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and you're all going to receive the link to that recording within the next 24 hours via email. So keep an eye on your inbox. Don't forget to download today's 2 handouts before the webinar ends. This is your last notice. They can be downloaded from the handout section of your GoToWebinar taskbar. And be sure to join us next Wednesday, September 16th, when UB alumni and Erie County Department of Health Administrator Jackie Andula helps us understand the public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including testing sites, contact tracing, and so much more. More information about all of these upcoming webinars, as well as our webinar archive library, can be found on our webinar webpage, and that will be linked in your follow-up email that you'll get tomorrow. So Marsha, before we take off for the day, do you have any closing remarks for our attendees today?
Just that I'm so grateful to be here. I just love sharing this topic, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to do that. Anyone out there who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'd love to keep a conversation going with you. And thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much, Marsha. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and we'll see you soon. Go Bulls.